What's up, guys? So this video was highly requested. I got tons of questions on my inbox about what are the 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 books that changed your life, that changed your perspective, that helped you see the world the way that you see the world today, right? And it's been a progression of different studies, a progression of different connections, right, that I've had that completely shifted my perspective. As you guys know, I don't come from a wealthy family, right? Dirt poor from a fucking third world country coming to the United States and eligible to make something happen. However, I had to go out there and shake people's hands that knew more than me and study certain books that perhaps introduced a different perspective that allowed me to see the world through a different lens that was ultimately beneficial for me and my success. Some of these books I have a physical copy of here. Some of these books I've either given away throughout my journey or listened to it via Audible. The first book that I want to go ahead and speak about, and this was actually one of the first books that I've read, was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the reason why this book shifted my perspective, I want to say I was around the age of 16, 17 when I started to read that book. A lot of people talk about it, right? When you meet entrepreneurs and you ask them, hey, like what books have shifted your perspective? Rich Dad, Poor Dad is always somewhere in there. Why? Because that book is about a person that had a rich father and a poor father. Now, his main biological father was the poor father. However, his best friend, his father was rich. His father was loaded, right? So he got to experience the world in both perspectives since he was so close with his best friend that he got to experience what his poor dad would teach him, what his rich dad would teach him, and he would kind of get a multitude of perspectives and summarize what's the best approach for him to take at life, how to look at money, how to look at the world, how to spend money, real estate. It talks about a lot of different things. And I mean, the one that I mentioned just now, real estate. I mean, I'm in real estate now. So he was actually one of the first authors that made me shift my perspective to the way that I view money. It's not about I can't afford it. It's about how can you afford it, right? So there's a famous line in that book that stuck with me the whole time. And it allowed my brain to exercise in, you could say, ways and strategies to think a little bit more critical and ask myself, how can I afford this? How could I make this happen, right? But there's a lot of more details that they go into in that book that introduces both perspectives so that you can see, maybe you've experienced living in a life of being raised by a poor family, but then now you can get the perspective of what it's like to be raised in a rich family and some of the values that are introduced in either side. So I think it's a great book, highly recommend it. That was one of my first books. Go ahead, grab a copy if you haven't read it and take a look at it, right? The next book that I want to go ahead and speak about is The Mystery Method by Erich von Markovitch. How to Get Beautiful Women into Bed. And I actually really liked that book and enjoyed that book because I was young, right? In my, I think I want to say 19, possibly maybe 20, around that age. And I was becoming more social, having more social experiences, more social interactions. And I always thought that there was a science to communication. I always knew that there was a way of communicating where people will gravitate more towards you. Is there a secret? Is there a science? And actually there is, right? So the mystery method is not just about getting beautiful women into bed. It's about understanding social dynamics. It's about understanding psychological patterns and how your communication is interpreted based on the value that you communicate within the stories that you share with people. So I think it's more than just picking up chicks. I think it's more than just getting beautiful women into bed. I think it's about understanding social dynamics, understanding what you are projecting in any environment that you step into based on your body language, based on your communication, based on how you share stories. There's so much great insight within that book. I cannot recommend it enough. The third book that I want to recommend, and I actually have a hard physical copy of here, is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. So Think and Grow Rich is a book where Napoleon Hill goes out and studies and interviews over 500 millionaires and takes the key points and the key lessons that he learned from all those millionaires and shares it with us in this valuable book, right? Man, there's so much perspective within this book, right? Think about it. If you had the option to have a conversation with 500 millionaires, how would your perspective shift? Do you believe that you would see the world differently, right? I mean, he goes over a lot of great things. That's just Another book that a lot of people talk about, especially if you're in the entrepreneur world or if you're looking to better yourself as an individual, I think Think and Grow Rich is one of those pillars or one of those fundamental books that I would recommend somebody to read. The fourth book that I have in mind is actually Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. So Maxwell was a plastic surgeon, and he had a variety of different experiences with his clients, and he's noticed that even people that went to go get plastic surgery, they would get certain things done, and that still wouldn't necessarily change their internal feeling about themselves and how they view themselves, right? So it's about self-image. He talks a lot about psychology. He speaks a lot about the mind and the subconscious mind and how that all can affect our mood, how we behave, what we think, what we say, how we perform. So I think overall, it's a great book to understand your own mindset, to understand your subconscious mind, to understand your habitual patterns that you may not necessarily be aware of, right? There's also specific tasks that he has within the books. And this is something that I could also say, right? There's a lot of people that read books, yet there's a lot of people that don't implement books, right? So in Psycho-Cybernetics, there are certain tasks that he does give you, right? It's mental exercises that allows you to upgrade your mental frame, to upgrade your self-image, to upgrade your perception of yourself and the perception of life that you have, right? So I think it's a great book to tap into a different set of eyes where you can see the world through a more healthy perspective and actually look at the world in a way that is going to positively influence you to be successful. Fifth book that I want to speak about is actually by Grant Cardone, Sell or Be Sold. This was a book that I read many, many years ago. Again, the reason why I decided to pick up that book is because I have my real estate license. That was when I was just getting into the game. And I wanted to get as much perspective when it comes down to sales. I wanted to really understand what sales is about. So many people have the misconception that a salesperson is a bad person. And those are only real salespeople that don't necessarily understand how to communicate and how to consult with another person, right? How to handle objections, how to understand the person's objections, how to have the proper mindset when you're going into a sales call or a sales presentation and be able to educate your client relentlessly until he ultimately does what's best for him. Listen, this is not about pushing anybody to do anything that they don't want to do. However, there is something that stuck with me while I was selling, and that was I'd rather get kicked out on my terms than on their terms. And what he means by that is I want to make sure that if I'm going into a sales presentation or a sales meeting, that I'm doing absolutely 100% everything that I can to help my client out and to help him understand that this is the service that he needs. And yeah, you could say, well, Jose, that's a very strong frame. Well, yeah, it is. However, I 100% believe in my product, and I know that anybody that buys my service is ultimately going to benefit himself. My clients have earned hundreds of thousands of dollars because of the commission that they invested in me, that I was capable of giving them back so much more, right? So it's about providing value. It's about understanding the value that your product delivers. And straight up, I believe he does mention it in the book. Listen, if you don't like what you're selling, stop selling it, right? You have to be authentic about the things that you do and about the products and services that you sell. Ooh, this is going to be a good one. The Essential Guide to NLP by Tom Hubyar and Tom Dotz. I like that book a lot because it's all about perspective, right? I've been speaking a lot about perspective, and it all has to do with perspective because there's a famous quote that says, he who says he can and he who says he can't are both usually right. However, in between that quote, in between that statement, there are certain nuances that goes on underneath the conscious mind, right? So what they speak about in the Essential Guide to NLP is about understanding your mental patterns, understanding your mental maps, understanding how you view the world through your senses. Are you more visual? Are you more kinesthetic? Are you more auditory? How do you relate to the world? What experiences have you had? What reference points do you connect to when you're making decisions on a day-to-day? Perhaps certain things that you're connecting to during your childhood, perhaps certain things that you're connecting to when a mentor taught you a certain thing or your parents taught you a certain thing. And how do you use those experiences or references to make your day-to-day decisions? Another thing that he also mentions in that book is typically we as humans, right? Our brains are designed to categorize information in three different categories, right? We're either generalizing it, we're distorting it, or we're deleting it, right? So a lot of the times when we recall on certain memories, a lot of the times we tend to generalize the information that we've gained from said experience. And a lot of the times you also distort what ended up happening with that specific scenario, like kind of like a broken telephone, right? Where the first person is saying one thing, but by the time it gets to the 100th person, it's a complete different message. It also depends on how long the experience took place, because the more years that accumulate after that experience, the more likely you are to generalize it, distort it, delete it. And that's just one specific aspect of the book. I like how he goes over specific exercises that allows you to go deep into your frames, deep into your mind, deep into your subconscious communication, so that you can really dig up how you communicate with yourself. What are the rhetoric questions and the beliefs that you have that are possibly holding you back or that are positively influencing you, right? Because a lot of the times we get in front of ourselves when it comes down to the successes that we want to achieve in our lives. So how do we understand how to interpret our own minds? How do we dig up the junk that's in our fucking brains that are prohibiting us from reaching and performing at our ultimate and most impactful level? These are the things that this book goes over, and it goes into detail and into nuances with even meta categories that influence us, even how we view a memory, even how we place ourselves in a memory, right? Are we viewing it from the first person point of view or the third person point of view? And how does that impact the way that we feel after recalling that specific experience? There are so many things that this book goes over, and I think it's a great way to get introduced to neuro-linguistic programming and the impact that it's already having on you without you even knowing. All right, drum roll please. Last but not fucking least, Can't Hurt Me by motherfucking David Goggins. Yo, that book straight up shifted my perspective when it comes down to what I can do and how much I can push myself to do certain things that I need to fucking get done. There's a lot of, you can say, logical books that go over a lot of logistics, right? But the thing that I like about Can't Hurt Me is that it's a personal story about David Goggins and the shit that he had to overcome to get to being the man that he is today, right? He was in the Navy SEALs. He's done incredible things. He's a triathlon athlete. He's the type of guy that when he says he's going to do something, he fucking does it. He doesn't care about the weather. He doesn't care about how he was feeling yesterday and how he's feeling now. His feelings have no say into his decision. It's about purpose. It's about his mission. It's about his why, right? And somebody that has grown up in such a difficult, you can say, upbringing. I'm not going to spoil the book because it's a tremendous story. It's a tragedy, certain things that happened within his story. However, despite of how hard it became, how hard it was for him to shift his life around, and even the influences within the environment, despite of those influences, he was still capable of making something great out of himself, right? Now he's a bestseller. He does speeches all over the world. I mean, he's just fucking killing it in life, right? So shout out to you, brother. That book is very, very impactful. And again, if you're really looking to dive deeper into a perspective that can challenge how far you're capable of going, what your limits are, that's definitely a book that's going to inspire you beyond the scientific facts that a doctor may tell you, oh, you can't do this because it's going to be beyond the human limit, blah, blah, blah. There's so many things that he debunks within his personal story. However, you have to have the mindset of it. And the only way to gain that mindset is to be inspired by the people who have lived it. So shout out to you, man. That was an inspiring and great book. Now, I mentioned something in the beginning. And what I meant by that was there are so many people that read books. I mean, I have so many different books right now on my desk, just thinking about what books that I should speak about today. And I chose the books that, as I was going through my journey when I first started, these were the books that had a great impact on my life, and it allowed me to continue to keep going on this journey as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, just being the best man that I could be, right? During these times, yes, I read these books. However, I implemented them. Everything that I gained from these books, I've implemented. Everything that I found useful within those resources that I just named, I implemented those things. So don't be the guy that's just reading a bunch of fucking books and you have a fucking library at home, but you're not implementing anything. Be the guy that's actually reading something and then implementing it. Right? If there's a specific verbiage or a specific way of being or speaking that you get from reading The Mystery Method, right? Or that you get from reading Sell or Be Sold, go out there and implement it. Or the Essential Guide to NLP, right? Whatever it is that you gain from reading these books, utilize it to your advantage, because that's what makes the information valuable. These books, They're just a bunch of pages combined together with some literature written by some guy that I've never met in real life. However, what I can tell you is that information is very valuable if I choose to utilize it and experience the feedback that I am likely to gain from the world as I'm utilizing that information and making it my own, right? So now I have an experience as to, does this work? Is this bullshit? Is this real? What results can I get from doing this? Because you're gonna now put yourself in a more experimental state. And this is what kind of state you need to be in when you're reading books, when you're watching content, when you're consuming, right? Because at the end of the day, you're mentally consuming all these things. When you're consuming all of these values, right? But how valuable are these values? Are they actually benefiting you? Or are you just reading a bunch of books and not really doing anything with it, right? So you really have to exercise doing more. You really have to exercise implementing the things that you read that are actually seen by you that could potentially benefit your life. So implement these things. Go out there, out of these 7 books, pick up one, if not all. And as you're going through these books, once you go over the first book, make sure that you're implementing as you're reading. You could read 10 pages a day. You can read a chapter a day. You can read 5 pages a day. You can read 1 page a fucking day. But if you're going to do it right. Read, implement, learn, get feedback, read again, implement, learn, get feedback. That's the proper cycle of doing things. If you're just fucking reading just for the fuck of it, you're not gonna gain any knowledge and you're wasting fucking time. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.